So mob programming, does that mean we have to all feign Italian accents?
You could, yeah.
That would be cool.
Maybe I'll, I don't know, get a t-shirt for who can do it the whole meetup or something.
There you go.
It won't be me. I'm awful at accents.
Yeah, actually, after that, my plan is to actually do it so that we could use like high fidelity with the VR headsets.
Ooh.
So people
Coding in the round?
No, not so much that, but be able to have people from around the world be getting in on it. So everybody that would be on headset would be on VR, and then you can see the screen.
Like a virtual screen or something?
Yeah, so you have virtual screen, or you can have everybody's screens in front of you, and do it so that I can interact with everybody all around the world all at once. So
Then you have that one troll that brings a scream into the screen, and now everyone's running out of the VR.
Yeah, but since I'm the admin, I can control that.
There you go.
That's the whole trick.
You can get some sort of semblance of that with like Slack or Google Hangout with everybody being there on like a video chat and then having a shared screen that way too.
Yeah, that's true, but especially with high fidelity, it's ambisonic sound. So when somebody's talking here and there, I could hear different, just like in real, just like you can hear now with two people having a conversation, you can still pick it out.
That makes sense.
Yeah, VR is pretty cool.
Opera.
But we're here to talk about JavaScript testing, which is really cool.
Sorry.
So here's the part where I say I'm definitely going to post my slides on my blog tonight. You're going to check tonight, tomorrow, next week, next month. In 3 months, you're going to get tired of waiting. You're going to email me. In 6 months, I'm going to reply and say, no, I'm definitely going to post them on my blog tonight, which is why you can go to robrich.org right now. If you go to robrich.org and you click on presentations, here is JavaScript tests in Node, the browser, and CI. You can click here on this link, and you'll get to the GitHub repository of the code that we're going to work with tonight. There's a start folder, which is where we'll begin, that has Node, the browser, and CI. And there's also a done folder, which is my solution. Feel free to peek and see how you can help. And if your solution is different than mine, or you find a bug in my solution, by all means, send me a pull request, and let's jump in and do it. So while you're here on robrich.org, click on About Me, and you'll get to this slide, this screen. Some of the things that I've done: I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm a friend of Redgate. AZ GiveCamp is wonderful. AZ GiveCamp brings volunteer developers together with charities who otherwise couldn't afford software services. We start Friday after work. Sunday afternoon, we deliver completed software back to the charities. It is really, really fun. Our annual event just finished last weekend, so join us again next month, and we're also looking to...
Yesterday, last weekend.
I've almost slept.
I can attest it's a fantastically great experience.
It is. It's a really amazing thing.
I think I gained another 5 pounds over that.
Yes. Sleep is optional, caffeine provided. One of the things that I did was I worked on the Gulp project in version 2 and version 3. So I got a whole lot of experience there in JavaScript and in Node, which was a lot of fun. .NET Rocks is one of the things I'm particularly proud of. I posted a comment on one of their shows. They read it on the air. They sent me a mug. Woohoo! So that's some of what I've done. I was asked to make slides for this presentation, but this is intentionally a no slides presentation. So let's dig in. I'm going to go into the start directory. I'm going to go into the one directory. And let's go create some tests. Now, every time we look at tests, we kind of look at the time to first it. Hello world.js. It will pass. Assert true reason. We'll pull assert in. And we have our first test. Time to first it, a minute. And I'm going to run Mocha to run all the tests, and we see that we have one passing test. Towards testing, it's really easy to get started. There's a couple of things that I glossed over here, and so let's kind of dig back in and see what we did. Here in my package.json, I've pulled in Mocha and I've pulled in Chai. Mocha is that test framework that gives us it, and Chai is an assertion library, we haven't used it yet, that will allow us to assert certain things. Mocha happens to also be our test runner, but in this case, but we can swap out other test runners as well. And so you can pick the various pieces that you like, both for the test runner and for the testing framework and for the assertion library, and you can even mix and match these to do interesting things. So we've got our hello world test, it. It is a function that takes two parameters. The first parameter is the name of our test. If we're kind of following DDD style, we'll probably have that kind of should do something. So in this case, I said will pass, should pass. And then the second argument is a function, and that is our test code. So Mocha will look through all of the code looking for these it functions and call each one to accomplish that test. And so that's what Mocha gives us, which is really, really cool. So I have this add library. It's just a function, add. It takes in an x and a y, and it will add those two together. This library is intentionally simple in its execution so that we can focus instead on the logic of how we test it. So I'm going to create a new file here in the test directory. It doesn't need to be in the test directory, but that's a good convention. Test add.js. And I will say it should add 2 and 2. Function arrange act assert. So here in my act, I'm going to say const actual equals add x and y. In my range, I'll set up x and y. So let's say const x equals 2, const y equals 2. And then here in our assert, let's say expect actual to equal expected. And so I'll set my expected up here as well. Const expected equals 4. And we have our test. Now here we're going to use Chai. So let's const expect equals require Chai. And we'll pull in the expect library out of Chai. And that gives us this expect syntax. And the really cool thing about this expect syntax is expect actual to equal expected. You know, we can kind of look through that and read it and really get a feel for how our test works. So we've got a second test. Let's run that. I'll just run Mocha from the command line, and it will go run all of our tests. And in this case, I see that my test failed. My test failed because I have a reference error, add is not defined. OK, well, let's go pull in add. Const add equals require / add. Fire up my test again. And now that test passes. With this function, we can kind of see how we can dig into our code and get a feel for it. Well, I'm going to wrap it in a describe block. And a describe block will give it a namespace, if you will. Now when I run my test, I'll see that my hello world test is out here. It isn't inside of a describe block. But then my add group will show me all of the add tests. So describe can be really helpful in organizing my tests. Well, I've got this should add 2 and 2, JavaScript being what it is. Let's say should add A and B. So X is A, Y is B, and I expect this to be AB. Mocha, and now we have 3 passing tests. So we saw really easily we can get started with testing, and we can do some really powerful things. Any questions so far?
Is your arrange act assert? I mean, I'm pretty new for the testing stuff. Is this like a standard way of
Good question.
Like a Chai Mocha community stuff.
Arrange, act, assert. This is a pretty good metaphor for testing where I'll set up the things that I want to do in my arrange section. I'll go do the thing, flex the functionality, and then I'll assert the results. And so that arrange, act, assert is not specific to Chai or Mocha or even JavaScript testing. It's a good kind of metaphor to get those 3 pieces of code really contained in elegant ways. Yeah, arrange, act, assert is really cool. In time, you may find that some tests don't elegantly fit that paradigm, but a lot of them really do. So like any good developer, I'm going to copy this test, create a new file. Let's change all the add to subtract. I'll save this as test subtract.js. And should subtract 2 and 2, that's going to be 0. And subtract doesn't work this way. So let's do 3 and 1 because let's just kind of flex different things. So 3 minus 1 equals 2. OK, let's run these tests. So I get this error, callback is not a function. Now what's really cool is it's going to very specifically show me the line number where that failed. In this case, it failed on line 3. So I can go dig into my library and say, well, here in subtract.js, what's on line 3? Oh, well, the author of this library chose to make it asynchronous. And so instead of passing in x and y and getting returned the result, here I'm going to pass in x, y, and a callback, and I'll get that callback when it's done. So let's modify this test to be able to do that. So I'm going to call subtract, and I'm also going to pass in my callback function. And the standard node syntax of a callback function, the first parameter in the result is an error, if any. And then I'll get my actual. And now I've got that test. I may also expect error to equal null. And I can do some truthy and falsy things there as well to say, null or undefined. But in this case, I'll just expect error to equal null. So I've got that in a callback mechanism. Let's set that in place here. But now how do I know when my test is done? Normally what Mocha is going to do is it's just going to execute, and as soon as this function ends here, it will consider that test done. But I'm doing an asynchronous test here, so I want to very specifically tell it when it's done. And so here, I will call this done function right here. Mocha knows that if it's going to pass in an argument right here, then that is the done function. So I'll call done here at the end, and that tells Mocha, yes, you've finished. Done. Done. Well, what happens if I don't call done? Well, that's going to be really cool. So subtract 2 and 2 succeeded, and now we have this timeout that says 200 milliseconds has elapsed. So ultimately, it timed out. It waited 2 seconds for that done to complete, and it didn't finish. If we wanted to wait longer, we could say here inside a describe block or inside of an it function, this dot duration equals 5,000 milliseconds. Wait longer. I think it actually might be time. This dot timeout. Yeah. So this dot timeout is 5,000. Now it's going to wait 5 seconds before it dies. And ultimately, because I didn't call done yet, it still is going to fail after 5 seconds. So now I'll actually call done, and we'll see all of the tests pass. So this timeout, I can set this globally for all tests by putting it out here. or I can set it for a specific set of tests by setting it in here, or I can set it for only one test by setting it in here. But here's the thing, is it's referencing this. This context is set as Mocha kicks up. So I'm going to be a good ES6 function programmer, and I'm going to turn this into an arrow function, and I'm going to turn this into an arrow function. And what does this refer to now? Well, because it's an arrow function, this is bound at the time that this function is initialized, not at the time that this function is run. So I can't even say something like .bind to Mocha, or bind to this, or I can't even do that because it's already been bound and this has already been set. So if you're going to use this .timeout, you probably want to avoid arrow functions inside your tests. Mocha specifically says, try to stay away from arrow functions if you can, just because of this that you may want to use to access some of the interesting pieces of Mocha. So we did a synchronous test, and we also did an asynchronous test using callbacks. Any questions so far?
Comment. I actually ran into the arrow function issue recently.
You hit the arrow function too?
I ran into it causing issues, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. How flat is your forehead now?
It was actually late Friday evening, so.
Late Friday evening.
Yeah.
There you go.
I whipped up an API skeleton for the event quickly.
So not only did you hit it, but you also missed out on the party that night too, huh?
Was there one?
We'll never tell. OK, so we tested this callback library. Multiply here is a promise-based library. So let's see, how would we test this promise-based library? So I'm going to come in here. Let's grab add. Let's create a new test. Test multiply.js. And we'll replace all the add with multiply. Now in this case, 2 times 2 is 4. So let's also multiply something else. Let's multiply 2 and 3, because 2 and 3 will be different than add. 2 and 3 multiplied will be 6. But we also want to do this promise. So this is going to say multiply dot then, and that's where we'll get actual. So again, let's stick the assert inside here. And now we need to tell the test when we're done. Well, the cool thing is last time we passed in this done function, and we definitely could do that here. We could say, call the done function like this. But we can also return a promise to Mocha. So we can just say return. And now it's going to handle the promise, and it's going to wait for the promise to resolve or reject. And if the promise rejects, it's going to fail the test. So let's do that here as well. And let's run the tests. Mocha. Now we've got 7 passing tests. That was really cool. Any questions on promise-based test? So there's this cool thing called async and await. And promises and async and await are really, really similar. So let's see if we can make this an async function. And rather than returning right away, we're going to say const actual equals await multiply. We'll assert our thing, and away we go. Because we can return a promise to Mocha, and because async functions are, in its very nature, just a promise, then this test will work just fine. We await the result. It implicitly returns that promise as we finish the function. and it will work just fine. So whether you have async and await code that you just want to call this way, or whether you have promise-based code that you want to call this way, async tests work just fine. Let's run that test, and that passes. Let's make it fail by saying 2 times 3 is 7, and let's see it fail. There's that test failing.
What's your favorite?
What's my favorite?
Of all the variations.
We've done synchronous code. We've done async with callbacks. We've done async with promises, and we've done async and await. Which one is my favorite? It depends on the library that I'm testing. You know, async and await is beautiful, but if the library that I'm testing uses callbacks, I probably need to test it using callbacks as well.
Okay.
That's a great question, though. OK. New file, test divide.js. Let's go grab add again, copy, divide. Now I know that divide is just a synchronous thing, so copying divide makes sense, or copying add makes sense. We'll have 2 over 2, and that will be 1. And then we'll have 2 and 0, because dividing by 0 is pretty cool. What should dividing by 0 do? We should see an exception. So let's say the expected thing is an exception. Divide by 0. Now there's ways to do I expect it to throw, but I find those a little bit less discoverable. Instead, I like to put in a try catch here. And I expect it to have an exception, so there's my expected result right there. Or there's my actual. So let actual equal null. And now not only is that test really, really legible, but I also get a sense of what I expect out of my library. I expect it to throw an exception, and I want to dig into that exception. Well, probably I want to say actual.code, you know, the exception message thrown out of that error. And so I expect that code. Maybe I'll say message for now can't divide by 0. But in time, I probably want to move to a code. So let's fire up this test. Mocha, can it read property message of null? So that says to me that we didn't actually error here, that it succeeded. So in this case, what's really cool is we're using our test to discover the functionality in our application. Let's go look at that divide function. Well, the one divide test succeeded, so dividing 2 and 2 does equal 1. But dividing by 0, it looks like a helpful developer knew that that was a condition and wanted to help us by offering some alternate math here. Well, that's cool. We just found a bug in our application by running our test. That's awesome. So instead, I want to say throw new error can't divide by 0.
Alternative maths.
Yeah, alternative maths. And now my test passes. Woohoo! So I threw the exception, but probably what we'll want to do with an exception is offer a code. This message here may get translated differently into different cultures. We may choose to alter this text from time to time. So instead, let's say error.code equals, the error code for this particular error. And let's throw it. And now each error can have a unique code. And back in our test, rather than flexing the message, which may change over time, we can look at the error code. Expected code to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the can't divide by 0 message. Expected code And now that test is really, really legible. We understand what our library is going to do. It's to throw an exception in this case. We understand that it should give us that expected code of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can see that that worked just fine. Synchronous tests, asynchronous tests using callbacks, asynchronous tests using promises, and asynchronous tests using async and await. And exception throwing code. We can see how each of these scenarios, we can elegantly handle them in Node. Any questions so far?
Enjoying it.
So this is really cool. We did the Node exercises. That's awesome. But I'm doing front-end stuff. I want to do front-end stuff with Angular or with React, or I want to use Backbone, or how do we do this? Well, what's really cool is I can come in here and I'll do an npm install Mocha, and I've done that previously. So now that I have that installed, then I can say Mocha init. And when I say Mocha init, it's going to go create a bunch of things for me in this folder. Oh, I haven't done it yet. Let's do it. Mocha init. Oh, Mocha init in the current directory. OK, so now we have a few more things. We have this index.html. And this index.html will pull in Mocha. It will set our test setup to BDD. And it'll pull in our tests. Well, I want to also pull in, and so if I launch this in a browser, start to index. Now I see that I currently have 0 tests passing. Woohoo! So let's go pull in our tests from the other library, from the Node section of this. And I'll pull in my libraries, script, source equals add.js. Subtract, multiply, divide, and then I'll also pull in my tests. It's 2019. Why don't we have a self-closing script tag?
Is it just script that doesn't self-close?
Yep.
Huh.
So you have the right editor?
Oh, it's browsers. Browsers just don't believe in self-closing script tags. So I've pulled in Mocha, but I'm also going to pull in chai. So here's that chai.js. Oops, that's not it. That's opening chai.js. Script source equals node modules chai.js. OK, so now that I have chai, now instead of requiring chai, because close to the right, instead of requiring chai in these tests, because I just now have chai as an ambient variable, then I'll just say let expect equal chai.expect. And add is also just an ambient variable because I've pulled in that script. Now, if I have a Webpack type of build, then yeah, I can require the things and everything just works. But I'm going to run around to each of my tests, making this change, pulling in chai, and removing the library, since I know that library already exists. And hello world, let's use chai here. Expect true to be true for reasons. OK. So now when I refresh my page, now I've got some tests and I've got some failures. Let's go into the console. Ooh, expect has already been declared. Yes, you're right. Even though this is a let, it's still going to get grumpy there. So rather than declaring it here, let's just assume that expect already exists as well. So yeah, I definitely need to update my ESLint rules. And here in index.html, we can add to this script. We'll Mocha set up BDD, and we'll let expect equal try.expect. Cool. So now I've got all of my test code, or all of my library code, and all of my test code. And let's run that test. Ooh, cannot read property code of null. So now here in the browser, we're hitting a similar error. Oh, apparently I did not save. Save all. And it's going to want me to save my lack of slide. There we go. Nice. So now we see all our tests, but we also see one test failure. Now what's really cool is I can dig into that test failure. Cannot read property code of null. That says to me that we didn't actually throw the exception. We succeeded. But I can also click on a group, and I can run only that group. Or I can click on a particular test and see the actual test code that was run, which is pretty cool. So here's that test. And here's what failed. Now this being Chrome, I can come in here to the sources, test divide. I know that it's this should divide end 0 thing. Let's set a breakpoint there. Let's rerun this test. OK, so I can step through and I can do the actual things. Let's dig into this library. Ooh, we have this alternate math thing going on again. OK, so now I know the problem here. Let's come back into this library and divide.js const error equals new error can't divide by 0. Error.code equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Throw error. Let's load this test again. We can still use F10 and F11 to go dig into all the things. Let's see it throw that exception. We catch it. Oh, look, there's that error with that code. And now our test will pass. Well, probably it'll pass. In this case, yes, I exceeded 2,000 milliseconds. That's OK. Let's get back into the thing with all of the tests, and we run it, and everything succeeds.
That's really neat.
So what is it doing in the meantime?
What is what doing in the meantime?
As it's running and then you catch the exception, how much of a delay?
How much of a delay was there? However long I sat there on the browser pushing F10. So in this case, probably 5 or 6 seconds. It was just waiting for me to push next. So I can focus in on a particular subset of tests that I want to flex. Ooh, zoomed in a little too far there. Or I can zoom in on a particular test. Or I can run all of the tests together at once. I can debug tests in the way that I'm used to debugging them in Node. And I can get this really, really elegant experience. Any questions on testing in the browser?
I have a different question though.
Yeah.
What exactly, when you use the Mocha library, is that the describe and the it?
Good question.
Or in the chai, like what is the chai part of this?
Yeah. So what is the different libraries giving us? Well, Mocha gives us describe. It gives us it. And then chai gives us expect. If we were using a library like Jasmine, it has both the test framework pieces and the assertion pieces in one library. So if we were going to use Jasmine, we would switch it to that. Jasmine wants E to be capitalized instead of a separate dot.
Assert's Mocha, right?
Assert is built into Node.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like even your production app could use Assert.
All right.
Don't, but you could.
I don't do a lot in Node, but I know a tiny bit.
Yeah.
It's good to know.
Yeah, Assert being built in is pretty cool.
Yeah, we were using .NET, it kind of goes to that after a while.
Yeah. So we've also got this Ajax library right here. Here's this Ajax library. It's this get all records function. Now we could pull in a React function or we could pull in an Angular function, but you know, this is kind of weird. $.ajax. How do we test this? So let's do that. Let's first pull in our thing, script, src equals ajax lib. Let's also pull in jQuery, script source equals jQuery. Now we want an ajax lib test. Script source equals test ajax lib.js. Let's go build this. Okay, so describe the ajax lib. And so in this case, I'm going to say the ajax lib get all records function. Now we've already pulled it into the global scope, so we don't need to import it. It should call the library. Arrange, act, assert. So let's dig back into that library. For the sake of argument, I'm going to copy it across so I don't have to flip back and forth. So we want to get all records. We want to pass it in an ID. And we want a callback function that takes in an error, if any, and some data. So let's call this actual. So now we'll have this assert in here, and we'll also have a done function that we'll call here at the end, done.
Missed an end function, by the way.
I missed an end function.
Build the
line
FUC
eight,
instead
yeah.
of FUNC.
All this alternate function. I pay my words extra. They mean what I want. No, I'm just kidding.
On line 1, describe is missing the C.
Ah.
That would have been really entertaining too. OK, so arrange. I need to pass it an ID. And const expected equals the data. Actually, let's expect an object, the data. And now I want to assert that actual expect actual to equal expected. Well, in this case, I would like it to check the entire object, not just that it points to the same thing. So I'm going to say to deep equal. And now it'll reach into all its properties, comparing each property and doing what it needs to do. And I'll also say expect error to equal null. I don't want it to have an exception. OK, so I'll set my ID. I'll call get records. Get records is going to go make this Ajax call. And then I hope it gets to this success function passing my data. Well, I don't actually want it to call real jQuery. So I want to take that over. $.ajax equals my function. Well, what do I pass to $.ajax? Well, I pass in this object, and I want to reach into that success function, so it's going to be passed an object. Let's call this args. And I want to call args.success null, and I want to pass some data. OK. So now my test will run. I'll call getRecords. GetRecords will do what it does. It'll call $.ajax, which I've defined here. $.ajax will reach into args and call success, passing in this expected object. Success is this function. Here's that expected object. And I will call my callback, passing in that data and no error. I have mocked jQuery Ajax. Well, I may have a test that wants to use real jQuery Ajax. So I probably want to grab jQuery Ajax and put it back when I'm done. So I'm going to say const real Ajax equals $.ajax. And I'll say after each $.ajax equals real Ajax. So I'm being a good net citizen, putting my mocks back after I finish. I could do this in a before each if I wanted to. Well, these before each and these after each, this is provided to us by Mocha. There's a before and after that runs at the beginning of all tests only once, and at the end of all tests only once. But this, whether it succeeds or fails, after each test, inside this describe block, it's going to go run this after each function. Now I don't have any thisness in here, so I could be all fancy and arrow function this one. So after each test, go put Ajax back. Now if anyone is actually using any Ajax-y things, then jQuery will still work correctly. Before each and after each. OK, so let's fire this test up and see if it works. Oh, helps if I save all the things. Save. And it works. We were able to test this function that had a dependent library by mocking out that dependent library in really elegant ways. JavaScript is JavaScript, so we just monkey patched into that library to do what we wanted it to do. Now, we could use other libraries like Sign-On to be able to mock things and stub things and keep track of calls. And if you were to do some really heavy lifting there, then Sign-On would be a good choice. But in this case, we just jumped into this library and did what we needed to do. We just monkey patched it into place so that we could do some interesting things. So how do we test the error handler? Well, the cool thing with this Ajax lib is the error handler is just this error function. And it's going to pass in this object with a lot of goo, which is kind of interesting. So we could say should fail in the library. So I would expect this to be something like that. Status is failed. Error is the error. So now, instead of calling success, I'm going to call error. And I'm going to pass in expected.xhr, expected.status, expected.error. I'm now testing the error path. Well, in this error path, I don't have a first thing and a second thing. So here, I'm not passing in the error and the actual. The actual that I want is actually the actual error. And I could validate that data was null if I really wanted to. Now I'm testing the fail condition, and I didn't need to set up my backend library to do something interesting. Let's run that test. And now we tested our error handler as well. If you have a library and you need to swap out certain pieces, in JavaScript, it's really easy to just jump in and do what you need to do. Yeah, JavaScript is so easy to abuse. OK, so we got our test to run in Node. We got our test to run in the browser. We debugged our test in the browser, which was really cool. So now they say, well, how do I get my test to run as part of the build? Well, can you just pop up a browser and load this page and check to see if the result of the page has, failure 0 in it? Is that OK? And the build engineer is like, yeah, no. And that's where we'll reach for Karma. Karma, like Mocha, Karma is a framework runtime that will allow us to kick up a browser, do what we need to do using the JavaScript testing framework of our choice, and then ultimately harvest those results and pass them back into the command line. So we're here inside folder 3, and we will say Karma init. Now I've already installed Karma as part of my package.config. So I've installed Karma. I've also installed Karma Chai, Karma Chrome Launcher, Karma Mocha, so that it can kind of reach into the things that it needs to be able to do what it needs to do. OK, Karma init. I love Karma init because it kind of interviews me and asks me, well, what does your project do? So which JavaScript testing framework would you like to use? I'm going to hit the down arrow and switch from Jasmine to Mocha. Or I could look at other ones, just kind of loop through the list. Well, yeah, I'm going to use Mocha. OK, will this add require.js? No, it won't. What browsers would you like to use? I'd like to use Chrome. I could also pick other ones. Phantom.js is really interesting. But in this case, yeah, I'll just pick Chrome. What's the location of your source and test files? I'm going to just say star.js. They're all in the root folder. But I could say, my source files are in source.js, or source/star.js, and my test files are in test/star, which means recursively through all the directories /star.js. So I can kind of separate those files if I'd like, or I can put them wherever I want. In this case, all of our files are in a root directory. So star.js. Should any of the files included in the previous patterns be excluded? Yes, let's exclude node modules. ***. Do you want Karma to watch all of the files? Yes, I would. So now, as part of that interview process, it got us to the point where we now have this karma.conf that represents the results of all of those interview questions. And we can go mess with this as well. So we're going to load Mocha, and we're going to load Chai. We can adjust the list of files or the list of excludes as we get going. We can add preprocessors like Istanbul for code coverage if we want to. We can alter the reporters, so we can do the Nyan cat reporter or the whatever reporters we'd like. And we told it to watch, and we told it we wanted to run in Chrome. So now when we say Karma start, now it's going to go fire up a browser, and it's going to go look for all of the tests and run them. Now the cool but annoying thing is it launches this browser in the top left of your default monitor, and it notices that it got killed. And so it will start it up again and again, and that drives me batty. Fine. I'm just going to minimize this browser. But that browser is the one that it uses to run all the tests in. Now I could choose a headless browser as well, and so for CI I probably would. Chrome headless is wonderful. Firefox headless is great as well.
So how do you choose the browsers?
How do I choose the browsers? As it interviewed me, it asked me which browsers I wanted to run. And here I answered Chrome.
Okay.
Once it wrote that file, now I have this list of browsers. So I could say, can you run in Chrome and Firefox? And now it'll run in both.
So technically, you can run it in the same browser with different size screens and all that.
Yeah, different size screens and different things. Now it's not running the pages. It's still just running unit tests. So I'm probably not going to walk through all of the screens. If I wanted to walk through the screens, I would reach for something like Cypress and actually have
Just the fact that it'll load
integration
and stuff
tests.
like that, yeah.
Yeah. But now I've got two browsers going, of which, hey, you just closed it. I'm going to pop it open again. Hope that's OK. OK, so now we've got our Karma runner going. Let's go grab our tests. Let's also go grab our libraries. Our libraries actually may already be in that folder. Yep. Does it have jQuery in there? Yep, it does. So now we can say karma init. Nope, not karma init. Karma, did I just blow away my config file? Nope, I got to it fast enough. Karma start. And now it's going to fire up the Karma in both browsers. It's going to go execute all of the tests. It's now idle, and it says, hey, you failed 2 tests. Describe is not defined at test add. Did I spell describe incorrectly? No, that's weird. That may be quite the fail. Let's yank the describe out and see if it fails on it. Yep, it. So it's not pulling in Karma, or it's not pulling in Mocha correctly. Framework says Mocha and Chai. This may be a fail. Let me cheat and go look at the example. Done. I also may have a missing dependency. List of files to exclude. Ooh. It looks like I need to leave that list of exclude files blank. Let me try that. Now in this case, I had to stop and restart because I changed the configuration. It watches all the other things, but it doesn't watch the configuration. OK. So now I've got a bunch of tests. I have 18 successful tests, and I have 2 failed tests. Well, the failed test is, well, I should shouldn't divide should divide 2 and 0, and I didn't actually get that exception. So I was able to discover here that my divide library is broken. Let's reach back into the divide library and unalternate math ourselves. I saved, and it automatically reran my tests. So we only had 10 tests, but here it's telling us we have 20 successful tests.
Per browser, right?
Yes. 10 tests in Chrome, 10 tests in Firefox. Hey, boss, I just increased our test count by 100%. Woohoo, I should get a raise. You want me to run it in another browser? Oh, look, I increased the test coverage by 300%.
I'll do all the versions of those browsers.
Yeah. Now, these are unit tests, so I'm flexing my functions. I'm not flexing my pages. So if I want to actually click through the site, then I would reach for something like Cypress.io. This is unit tests. And so here in Karma, I'm able to flex my JavaScript functions. I'm not reaching into the DOM. It's possible to reach into the DOM, but basically when I reach into the DOM, I'm just polluting this page. So how does it keep track of that? It gets kind of ugly. Now I can click debug here, and I can pull up the test. This page is blank, but if I hit the F12 developer tools, I can look at the sources, and I can do interesting things. So for example, we wanted to step into that divide test. Now I'll hit refresh on this debug page, and I can walk through that test and do all of the things that we did before. Now this debug page, kind of like the Mocha page, allows me to debug tests in really elegant ways. I could do this on the main page as well, but at the end of the day, it's not going to give me a great description of what happened. Same thing here. If I pull up the F12 developer tools and start poking into stuff, it's interesting, but it may go, hey, I noticed the browser isn't responding. I'm going to go kill it and restart it again. I'm in the middle of debugging my test. So I find usually when I want to debug my tests, I'll flip out of Karma and flip back into Mocha and do it this way. So usually I have both Mocha and Karma pointing at the same suite of tests, and then Karma will get run by CI, and I'll use Mocha for local debugging. But the cool thing is, here we ran Karma in watch mode, so anytime I push save, it'll kick off. But I can also say Karma start dash dash single run equals false. And now it'll fire up. It'll run those tests. It'll pass or fail. And it didn't close.
Did you mean to do true?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
You have to tell it when to stop, right?
Single run is true. So now it starts up, it does all the tests, and it reports the results. Echo error level. I got a 0 back from this test. So let's go break one of those tests. Let's say adding 2 plus 2 should equal 5. So now I'll do a Karma start dash dash single run equals true. It'll run the tests. And now I've got my errors, but I also have an exit code of 1. So in my build script, I can just say, hey, go run Karma start, passing in whatever browsers you'd like, and single run. And then when that returns 0, then that test passed. And when it returns non-0, then that test failed. And I can just put that build step into my build. The other interesting thing is I can say Karma start dash dash single run dash dash browsers equals Chrome headless, Firefox headless. So I could have different browsers running on my CI server as I have running on my local machine. Maybe on my local machine, I want the Chrome to pop up so I can go debug through it. And on the CI server, I want it to just run headless. So ultimately, that Karma conf doesn't know what Chrome headless and Firefox headless is. But if I have those packages installed, so for example, I have the Firefox launcher in here. And if I reach into here and I define what Firefox headless means, then now I've told it, hey, here's how you launch Firefox, but pass in the dash headless flag on the command line as you start up Firefox, and now it won't start the UI. It'll just run the tests inside that Firefox engine. Chrome has this built in, so I can just say Chrome headless, but I kind of have to teach it how Firefox headless works. Sadly, there isn't an IE headless. But if you must support IE, I'm sorry.
Soon it'll just be Chrome.
Yeah.
Not even Edge, because it was supposed to be closer, right? Let's go.
In a minute, Edge will be Chrome, and then it'll work just fine. Yeah. So we did testing inside of Node. we took those exact same tests and we put them inside the browser, and then we ran them from the command line using Karma to be able to integrate into our build system. We've tested in Node, we've tested in the browser, and we've tested in CI. Any questions? Yep.
You had a really good example of the error level and building into your script, just running it one time. Could you maybe explain a little bit more when you would run it continuously?
Yeah. So there's watch mode. And the cool thing about watch mode, I'm just going to say Karma start. I'm not going to override any of the parameters. Pardon me. Here with Karma start, it's going to run single mode is false, so it's not going to run once and then exit. And it's also going to run in watch mode. Now what watch mode says is I'm going to watch and see if any of your files have changed. And if any of your files change, I'm going to rerun all the tests automatically.
So nice.
So I'm going to come in here and say, I'm going to say 2 plus 2 is actually 4. Here's my Karma running from the command line. I've got 2 failed tests right now. I'm going to save. Automatically, without me typing anything, it reran all of those tests. Karma has that mode, and I didn't show you while we were here in Node, but I can say Mocha, and that just ran it once, or I can say Mocha -- watch, and it will do a similar thing. The terminal didn't exit. So I'm going to go back into that one folder, and I'm going to change one of these tests. And it reruns as well. It's still watching. So I can have a Mocha test runner when I'm doing server-side stuff, or I can have a Karma test runner just kind of sitting there in another monitor, or in my terminal window inside VS Code. And whenever I make a change, it'll just run. Now in this case, I got a compile error, so it gave me that compile error, and it just crashed out of the test. I'm going to fix my test, and it reran. I didn't need to change anything. The only time I'll have to stop my terminal and restart it is if I change the configuration details of my runner. So in this case, I have my karmaconf.js, and if I said, oh, and by the way, I have a few more test file locations, source *****.js, and app *****.js. Now I would need to stop and restart the runner so that it would notice this configuration change. Yeah, watch is amazing.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I know at one point in time for Chrome Headless, you used to have to disable the GPU due to some bug.
Mm-hmm.
You know if that's been fixed? I know she didn't put it up there.
I've not hit that bug, so.
I've never hit it, but everyone says you're supposed to. Because I'm always just throwing it in there. Well, that's because of the scheduler, right? It grabs all the threads and starts mixing around. Not a clue. I was trying to find what caused it.
Yeah.
My Google search foo was failing me.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that bug. I kind of want to say continue disabling it or try not disabling it and seeing if it fails. And that would be a good experiment.
Yeah, and it was only supposed to be on Windows. Like all the other operating systems
Ooh.
would be fine.
So you only need to disable the GPU on Windows tests inside Chrome. That's kind of cool. I wonder if that's gotten fixed in Edge.
Maybe when it comes out.
Yeah, maybe. I generally don't write unit tests that flex GPU functions anyway. I'm not calling request animation frame or doing interesting things there. So I actually haven't hit that scenario. That's pretty cool, though. What other questions do you have?
So you can run this Karma test in the GitLab or something? Can you do that?
Can I do it in GitLab?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
That is GitLab CI/CD.
In my build.bat, so I'll probably have a build script somewhere. Let me go create a build script, new file. I may have a build.bat file on Windows, or I may have a build.sh file, and it may be doing things like npm install, npm test, Angular build, something along those lines. It might do some back-end things, .NET Restore, .NET Build. And into this file that runs all the build steps, I will add karma start -- single run equals true. If I want to, I add browsers equals Chrome headless, specify my browsers that I want. And that's just one of the lines in my build script.
So how the test report look like after you run?
How does the test report look like? It depends on the reporter that I choose. In this case, my reporter is just progress, but I may reach into Mocha reporters and do all kinds of interesting reporters. Pardon me for making you dizzy for a minute. Here's a regular reporter.
These colors. Yeah.
Reporters, show me the fun ones. Here we go. So here's the regular reporter. I can also do a reporter like this, where I just get a dot per test. Or I can have a Nyan cat fly across the screen as the report goes. Here's tap, so it looks like tap results. The landing strip, so my strip keeps getting longer until my plane finally lands. And so ultimately, this is just dumping it to console to standard out. And so however my test runner captures that standard out, I can do it that way. I can also very specifically output a JUnit style test result where it's XML listing each test and if it succeeded or failed and all the details. I can also detail things like the JSON reporter if I want to suck in my reports that way. Each of these reporters, most of them I just get when I install Mocha, but I could also install a third-party test runner as well. And that's what that Mocha, or that's what this chai setting says is, which report processor should I send into Mocha, as I call it? If I was just going to call Mocha with a test runner, I would say Mocha -- reporter equals Nyan, and it would run the test that way too. You may choose to wrap your tests, your test run inside Istanbul that gives you a really nice report including code coverage. And that could be really interesting from a build standpoint as well. Yeah.
So Rob, to circle back around to that disabled GPU, looks like they finally fixed the bug as of last year that was causing that.
Ooh, very nice. They finally fixed the bug.
Yeah, so they've only been open like 2 years.
Ooh. It's only been open 2 years, and now it's only been closed for a year.
Yeah.
Whose bug was it?
Chrome's.
That's really cool.
No, actually, I finally found the Google issue on the Chromium bug tracker.
So we talked very specifically about Mocha and Chai. There are other test runners out there. Here is a blog post about an overview of JavaScript testing in 2019. And I can post this to the meetup page. And it lists a few: Karma, Jasmine, Jest, Test Cafe, Cypress, Jasmine, Jest, Cucumber, Test Cafe, Cypress, Chai, Jasmine, Jest, Unexpected, Test Cafe, Cypress, Mocha, Jasmine, Jest, Karma, and so Sign On, Jasmine, Enzyme, Jest. There's lots of other test frameworks. We focused on Chai and Mocha because they're kind of the core ones that everyone either clones or builds on top of, but there's a whole lot more. And so if you find a test framework or an assertion library that you find is more comfortable, that better fits your style, by all means, leap into that.
I happen to have a fondness for Ava as well.
Ava?
As far as Ava's more of a, I guess, direct unit testing tool rather than BDD style phrasing.
That's pretty cool. But here's my pitch, whatever framework you use. We just built a whole bunch of tests in not very long. This is not hard.
Nope.
Go do it.
Surprise. surprised.
It's only hard if your code is not written to be testable.
Yes. If you make your code hard to test, it will be hard to test. Yeah.
Does everybody have like different people for testing versus coding?
We used to.
Yeah.
That used to be
That's
me.
starting to go away, right? I hope.
For my team, yeah, everybody is doing everything now.
And I think that is actually a really bad thing ultimately, to have that go away.
Yeah,
It's great to do all of these automated tests, but none of us are the QA people that are gonna truly hammer on the system, that are gonna look for all the possible ways to break it, all the security flaws. And if we try to do that, we're not really gonna be doing functionality. We're gonna be doing testing all day long.
Yeah.
It's gotta be a nice balance. I have QA people that I'm trying to get more of our devs to do this kind of testing, so our QA can get out of the happy path testing. If all your QA is doing is happy path testing, that's a waste of money.
Yes.
We can automate the happy path.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
stuff I can't automate is all the like security stuff and all the random things that keep coming up in the industry of new ways to potentially break and hack stuff, and like, to try to automate that stuff is tough.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
Trying to do stress testing automated is tough.
Yeah.
That's where the value comes in. Having those
QA
people-
engineers are great at that penetration testing and the fuzz testing and the black box testing. Developers are really good at happy path testing and white box testing. But a developer who wrote the code isn't going to be very good at trying to poke at it as if they don't know how it works. We bring to our code our own assumptions, and it's hard to step away from that. Code reviews can help with that too a bit, but ultimately, testing is a skill, and not all developers are very good at it.
Or even want to do it sometimes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But ultimately, if we presume that that developers never test, then we're not going to architect our code in a testable way, and we're not even going to catch when the happy path fails. So developers should write that first line of unit testing.
And I even had a scenario where me as a developer, I did happy path testing, and QA broke the exact happy path test I did, because I inserted a user before I inserted a note for the user, and they went the opposite way. They put a note in and then added the user to a team. And they went, why did my teams not save? Like I went the opposite way, all of my happy path testing.
Right.
You did
I love watching
I
users
knew
use my
that,
system.
I knew that was normally what we did. They went, let me do the opposite way, which was very possible for users to do.
Mhm.
That's the value of QA. Like,
Yeah.
I had an automated test. I didn't have it like, both directions.
Let me watch users use my system in ways I didn't expect it to run, and their happy path and my happy path are different.
Now, when your QA does find that stuff, first thing as a dev, write that test so they don't find it a second time.
Yeah.
You find it every time you break it.
Write a test to flex those paths that failed. Yeah. And that's the cool but annoying part about code coverage, is it tells you which lines were hit, but it doesn't tell you that you flexed all the scenarios that are possible in your application. So 100% code coverage does not tell you very much. Usually what it tells you is that you gamed the system.
Yep. I literally could go into every function and just say, call a function, return true, and I'm going to get 100% code coverage.
Yep.
I didn't flex anything.
Yeah.
I didn't assert anything. I just called all the functions.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was working on Windows CE, Microsoft's idea of trying to find those scenarios was to build like a million monkey approach, where you just randomly sit there and push buttons.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And computers are really good at those million monkey scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it didn't solve a lot of problems though,
Right.
We had to go to an actual scenario where you press it on sequence knowing what would fail. And that actually worked better. But the
Yeah.
problem is that it's a bitch to pay for, something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Time to write test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the better you get at it, the more time you will save, because here's the magic of this. Developers like writing code. Developers don't like debugging code. Writing tests is debugging code by writing more code, which is the thing that we love to do. If you don't like debugging your code, get better at writing tests, because you won't need to as much.
Yeah, that's a good point.
More people need to say that.
Yeah. Awesome. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for coming.